Welcome to the Guns and Noses podcast. My name's Helen Taylor and I am the owner of Guns and Noses, and I own 3 Labradors. We're here to talk about real moments, real lives, and the wins, the wobblers, and the occasional up yours moments. We're talking about those dogs with enthusiasm and us humans who are trying to keep up. So why don't you sit back, grab a brew, slow down, and listen in. Hello and welcome back to another podcast with me, Helen Taylor at Guns and Noses, accompanied by Jack, Red and Sky, who are currently snoozing in the beautiful sunshine that we've got today. Now, we've spoken about observations in the past, and we've also spoken about the warm-up, which is something that you shouldn't skip during a training session. It's actually so valuable, but the next thing that I would really like to talk about is equally just as valuable, and that is giving your dog a break during a training session. Now, we all understand that breaks are important, and we all understand that our dogs need time to process information. But what I'm talking about is those small moments during a training session. And if you've done your warm-up and you're into your training session and you've done about 10 minutes of something new, before your dog starts staring into the sky and zoning out and completely ignoring you, what I'd like you to do is take a break or think about taking a break. Now, the reason for this is if your dog zones out and every time they zone out, you say, oh, they've had enough. They're bored of this exercise, they're too tired, whatever it may be, whatever comes into your mind, it might not be those things. It might be that they're just asking you for a moment of reflection. Now think about yourself. You're at work, you get your set breaks. So you might start work at 9 o'clock, you might get a break at 10:30, you get your lunch at 12, you have a break at 1:30, 2 o'clock, and then you go home at 5. But dogs need smaller breaks in shorter periods of time. And this is to help them process and reflect on what it is that they've just been learning. If we get in there first and we offer them a break before they zone out, usually what ends up happening is that they can then come back after a minute or two and start that lesson again. But if we only ever give them a break when they have zoned out and they have looked into the sky and started staring at the birds, then what ends up happening is our dogs end up learning that zone out gets them out of training. So I've seen this just recently with a couple of dogs where they just maybe sit down and just look into the sky and their owners go, oh, they can't do it, it's too difficult, or they're tired, or they're bored of this particular exercise. And that happens sooner and sooner within a training session. So they're never able to get the strength of mind in the dog or that mental stamina extended because the dog learns that zoning out works. Don't forget, we're dealing with dogs who are very smart. We're dealing with those dogs who are designed to do a job at a distance where they're not necessarily asked to do something really super close to us for long periods of time. And they might find the exercise difficult, or they might find it boring, or they might find it a little underwhelming. But what we have to do is to increase strength of mind and to increase that mental stamina, we have to think to ourselves, right, okay, this exercise for my dog is not necessarily the best type of exercise because it might be static. So let's say you're teaching stays or you're teaching heel work, which might be a little boring for both you and your dog. What we need to think about is the break that we give them isn't necessarily about just shutting off, going for a sniff, dragging you around on the lead. It could be another exercise that they know and love. So just imagine, like kids at school, They go out for breaks, but they don't sit and do nothing. They run around the playground. They play football with their mates. They might have a game of tig. They don't just go and sit and do nothing. Once they've had their lunch, they're usually wanting to exercise their legs. So when we talk about giving our dogs a break, we don't mean go away and sit down for 20 minutes or actually stop training altogether. What we think about is, do they need a bit of a leg stretch? So could we do a little bit of recall training or the turn whistle exercise, which is a really great one, to increase that mental stamina and the ability to stay with us during an exercise that is difficult or new. And new exercises usually are difficult because they don't know it yet. So today we were training in gun dog, and I had a couple of young dogs in the class, about 18 months old, one spaniel, one Labrador, and both of them did really well. But what we were asking of them was quite low level, but it was difficult on their minds. So it was hard for them to really think about. They had to really put their brains into it. And all it was really simple sit exercise where we're asking the dog to be in a better position by our side in what I call the green zone area. So if we're thinking about lead walking, where we want our dogs to be is sitting facing forward in the green zone area. Now, the amber zone area is where they might sit by our side, but maybe on a bit of an angle. The red zone area is where they sit in front of us. Now, remember, the red, green, and amber zones are actually different dependent on the exercise that we're teaching. If we're teaching a retrieve exercise, the green zone is directly in front of us, so please don't mix this up. But when it comes to being precise and asking for a little more precision from our dogs, it's really hard on their brains because we're getting them to think. And these two dogs were doing really super well, but both of them, being entire male boys, needed to go off and have a break. Now, usually people think, well, that's, having a bit of a sniff around and cocking their leg up everything. But actually, sometimes when we give them too much of that, what ends up happening is that they zone out from us a lot sooner. So what we actually asked them to do, instead of just going off and, doing absolutely nothing, was to stay with us for a bit longer, doing a little bit of recall, a little bit of faster paced lead walking. We did a couple of turn whistles, we did some stop work, and then we went back into the harder exercise. But what we need to think about is, if we go to a training class or we are going and doing some training with our dog, let's say we take an hour's training, most dogs who haven't got mental stamina will shut down at about 45 minutes in completely. If we don't allow these moments to pause, these moments to have a break, and these moments to process the information. So if you're trying to push your dog forward and you're not giving them the opportunity to think about the lesson that we are teaching them, and ultimately have a little bit of a leg stretch, or like with us humans, we might just rock back in our chair, we might have a bit of a stretch, we might roll our shoulders, we might pop up and go and make a quick brew or grab a glass of water. If we're not giving them those moments, the lesson will never sink in, or it will be harder for it to sink in. And what will end up happening is our dogs will learn that shutting down and staring into the sky works. It means that we will take the pressure off, so we will stop training, we will stop asking them for something new that's maybe a little bit more difficult. So it could be physically difficult or it could be mentally difficult. So what we want to do instead is, during our training session, is make sure that we give them those breaks before they ask for them, and we do something different with them that maybe isn't just sniffing around the field or going and cocking their legs. Now, I'm not saying that this isn't important, because it is, especially for those young male dogs who are really trying to find their feet in life. But there's another reason why dogs sometimes just glaze over and stare into the sky, and that could be that they're thirsty. So there's some real simple biological things that dogs need, even during a training session. And if we've explored going to the toilet, then it's not that. We've explored changing treats or upping the ante on the treats or giving more treats. If they haven't had an opportunity to have a drink, then that could be playing a part as well. So these are all things that I want you to think about. But once we've offered these things, and if there's no other apparent reason why our dog has glazed over and looked into the sky for something more interesting, then it may be that we just need to take that information, give them a little break, and then try again. And usually what ends up happening is the dogs haven't shut down completely. They haven't glazed over completely. What they're saying to you is, let's just take a moment to pause and reflect. When we offer that and we look at that information, our dogs can usually train for a little bit longer. So here I want you to reflect. When you next take your dog out and you do some training with your dog, I want you to clock the time. See how long it takes your dog to glaze over. And if it happens at about 15 minutes, once you've done your warm-up, once you've done your connection exercises, what you will then do going forward is you will give them a break at 10 minutes. So you're eliciting that break. You're eliciting that little bit of time out. If it is then that your dog for a week gets a break at 10 minutes, what you do then the week after is you test again. So you train until your dog glazes over, you clock the time, you say, how long has it been since we started? And if then it's at 20 minutes, you then start giving them a break at 15 minutes. And that's how we start to gather and entice them to strengthen their mind and their cognitive ability. But there's absolutely no point in getting to the point where your dog can focus and concentrate for an hour, because that's, no fun or enjoyment for anybody. We want to elicit breaks. We want to give them the opportunity to learn and reflect. Otherwise, we get a dog who is really super switched on and it becomes almost obsessive. So breaks are really important, whether your dog's got good cognitive ability or not. So reflect on this. Think about your dogs, especially if you live in multi-dog households like I do, because some dogs can go longer than others before they need that little bit of an outlet. So reflect this week with your dog. If they're doing really well and they start to glaze over, give them an opportunity for a break, clock that time, how long it took them, and start giving them a break beforehand. And this is even more important when we are teaching lead walking. So if you're teaching your dog to walk nicely on the lead and you're expecting them to walk for an hour and concentrate in a beautiful heel position, you're very unlikely to get it and you're more likely to fail. And so is your dog. But not only that, you and your dog will start to get frustrated. And frustration is one of the biggest killers of lead walking. So reflect on this. Observe your dogs and train kindly. Thank you for spending this time with me. If today's episode helped you slow down, feel seen, or think a little differently about your dog, then it's done its job. Remember, progress isn't about perfection. It's about observation and reflection. You're not behind, you're not failing, and you're definitely not alone. Until next time, keep training kindly and try to keep up. And if you want to find out more about me, Helen Taylor, and Guns and Noses, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram, and you can also head to the website, which I will add into the show notes.